Without any official results, each presidential campaign has spun the situation to the best of their ability. Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign manager said the campaign feels confident that it's close between Warren, Sanders, and Buttigieg, adding, quote, "The vice president is a distant fourth."
Joining us now via Skype to dive into the mess that was the Iowa Caucus is Adam Green. He's the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee and a supporter of Elizabeth Warren. Great to see you, Adam.
Hey, good morning.
Good to see you.
All right, just top-line reactions. I mean, some of the campaigns, obviously Pete and Sanders were releasing some of the data that they had gathered from their volunteers. What are you all seeing? What's the Warren campaign seeing in their internal data?
Yeah, so it's a big mess here in Des Moines, and it will be probably for a while, maybe in perpetuity. But there are a couple things that are clear despite the mess. One is that a big loser last night was Joe Biden, right? By everybody's numbers, he's likely in fourth, even in a best case scenario, maybe third, but it's looking like fourth. And that is not something that you expect from an establishment frontrunner. So for all the people out there who are thinking about electability and think that he has this veil of invincibility, that is clearly punctured. And my prediction is that given the good night that we saw for progressives last night between Bernie and Warren, that we will see more and more support gravitate their way as people realize that they are more electable. Now, second thing I would point out is that what we saw between rounds of voting, is that Elizabeth Warren, who is now clearly in the top three in a contested race with Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, was able to increase her coalition between rounds. We actually didn't see that same thing for Bernie Sanders. I think he actually decreased his share of support between rounds. So it'll be interesting to see what Democratic voters think in terms of who can unify the Democratic Party.
Yeah, we are waiting with bated breath, really, for those results. Can you tell us maybe about that insight, about that second choice, maybe going to Elizabeth Warren? Adam, where was that support coming from? Was it from Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, or Pete Buttigieg?
Yeah, so I was at a very large caucus site here in Des Moines. I saw other anecdotes on Twitter. What I saw was that it came from many other candidates. There were some Amy Klobuchar supporters who liked Amy Klobuchar but thought we needed a first woman president and liked Elizabeth Warren's values. Some of them came over. Some people from Andrew Yang or Tom Steyer or whoever else was not viable would come over. I also talked to some people who were deciding between Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. There's not exactly the same rhyme or reason to everybody's thinking that we think about in Washington, D.C. or Beltway circles. But people have different reasons. And again, Elizabeth Warren has shown that she can really unify the Democratic Party and seems to be a lot of people's second choice, which is great if she's not their first choice.
Yeah.
All right, so we have zero official results, and yet Pete Buttigieg gave a victory speech last night, is claiming victory today on Twitter and at an event in New Hampshire. What do you make of that move?
Well, look, it was a big night for Pete in the sense of his last election was won with 8,000 votes in a liberal college town, and he's just thrilled to have beaten 8,000 votes last night. So, I guess hats off for that. But it was probably kind of premature that he did that. I think what it showed was that, he banked everything on Iowa. It's hard to imagine a state that you win after Iowa. It's hard to imagine a path to victory. Pete Buttigieg is basically a spoiler at this point. I think this will probably come down to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in the end. But, I think Bernie Sanders then also announced some results, probably prematurely, but I think in reaction to Pete, which was fair. We'll see where it goes.
And so, Adam, let's talk about that then. What does the dynamic of the race look like with a Buttigieg, Warren, and Bernie race? How are you thinking about that from the map going forward? Because that kind of, disrupts the way that our mental model was. It was about possibly Bernie and Biden.
Yeah, no, it really does come down to who can build the largest coalition to win, right? Who can stay committed to their values while also building a coalition across the party. And one thing we see with Elizabeth Warren is that she will stick to her guns when it comes to the core principles of fighting for everyday people, returning government to the side of regular people, taking on corrupt and corporate interests, while winning over regular swing voters. I've met some of those swing voters, longtime Republicans in Iowa here, who want to see someone take on corruption and take on big corporations on their behalf. So our prediction is that, it will really matter who has a high ceiling at this point, not just a high floor. What we've known all along with Bernie Sanders is he had a very high floor. That was borne out last night. He will always have somewhere between 15 and 25%. The question is, can you grow beyond that to unify the party against Trump? And what we saw in 2016 was that if our own party had not voted for Jill Stein or had not stayed home, we would have defeated Donald Trump. So we need to unify our party and go full throttle in 2020.
Well,
And again,
Adam, the counter to that is there were some numbers that came out that I saw Warren folks touting that I'm sure you saw of whose supporters would definitely back the Democratic nominee. And Elizabeth Warren's basically 100%. None of them said that they would even consider going in another direction. But isn't the counter to your argument that you want those folks who are kind of on the edge, may go for the Democratic nominee, maybe they're new to the process,
right.
maybe they just stay home? Isn't that an electability argument that is a strength for both Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang and the other anti-establishment candidates?
I think there's a lot of anti-establishment candidates. I don't think hostage taking is the solution to picking a nominee. You know, what we need is somebody who can both motivate and energize our base and win over swing voters, which Elizabeth Warren has done throughout her political career, has done throughout this campaign, and proved last night. Again, her support went up between rounds, Bernie's went down. But the thing that's really frustrating to me, honestly, is just the erasure of Elizabeth Warren's rise and Joe Biden's fall last night and a couple days before with the Des Moines Register poll, which showed her very high in the polls, showed Biden at fourth, which also was not released.
I think you're right to be angry about that.
You should be outraged. I think anybody should. The Biden campaign has just been run away with this thing, and they don't deserve it.
Yeah. And Adam, one last question for you. I mean, how do you view New Hampshire? Obviously, there's a lot made of the fact that it's a neighboring state to Massachusetts, obviously also a neighboring state to Vermont. Do you see it as a must-win for the Warren campaign?
No, I'm not sure any one state is a must-win at this point. I'm really curious to see what Joe Biden's numbers look like in a couple days, given that New Hampshire voters have seen the veil of invincibility go away and the veil of electability go away. I think a lot of those votes will be redistributed. You know, again, I think Pete will enter in a shaky situation, and we'll see where things go. But I do think that Elizabeth Warren enters New Hampshire with some momentum, and I'm really excited about the next couple states after that, which have a more diverse population. We'll see.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Adam. As always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Great to see you. Next on Rising, how did the Young Turks Cenk Uygur view last night's events? His reaction, that's next.